Alrighty, we will call this long overdue, long time coming Community Development Committee to order. I'm John Strand, welcoming you today, and let's just go around the table, maybe starting to my right, and introduce each other and remind everybody who you're representing, and we'll go from there.
Hello, Melissa Brand, Downtown Community Partnership.
Mike Rethinger, City of Fargo staff.
John Gunkelman, Chair of the Planning Commission.
Thomas Hill from United Way of Cass Clay.
Sam McDonald, member at large.
Robin Nelson, representing the Fargo School District.
Thank you all, and if you don't mind, let's go over to our staff and just run down the tables too. You're all as involved as us.
Tia Braseth, Community Development in the Planning Department.
Nicole Crutchfield, Planning Department.
Miranda Wolf, Planning Department.
And Karen is in the back?
Yeah, we have Karen Flum with us.
Good. All righty. Does anybody have any changes in the agenda? We'll separate that out. Okay, and does anybody corrections or changes to the minutes from our February meeting, if we remember that? If not, I'll entertain a motion to receive and file them.
So moved.
So moved by Sam.
Second.
Second by Thomas. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Going to the public, is there anybody in the audience who would like to address the Community Development Committee today? Okay, we'll continue. Now on to our business, and a lot of today's work will be catching up, reminding us where we're at, and regrounding ourselves to go forward after what we've all been through the last few months. So we'll start with an update on the Lashkowitz high-rise. Nicole?
So I know we've indicated that CD Commissioner Matthew Pike from the Fargo Housing Authority would be here today. I thought that might be him walking in, but just a quick update. I just received information from him earlier this morning. We've been working throughout the last couple of months. I should say his team has been working for the last couple of months. Oh, here he comes. And so maybe I'll just introduce Matthew as he's walking up. He's been working with his consultant and his board and group for the last couple of months about an RFP for the deacquisitioning of the high rise, and so he's got some updates. He's got some exciting information to share. So sorry, Matthew, just to fill in
Sorry,
time.
I'm late.
Yeah.
Good afternoon, everybody. Commissioner Strand, sorry I'm late.
Thank you, Matthew.
No, it's a pleasure to see everybody again. So the update is, I'm pleased to report that with about a 90-day schedule looking towards a mid-November deadline, we have just published and released a request for proposals seeking a co-developer for the high-rise property. We're in the process of relocating those residents under tenant protection vouchers that were issued from HUD after a March 18th disposition grant for that property. And so this is the next step. We take care of the residents first, as we always do, and the next step is to begin looking at the future of that property. So that RFP is out there online, and I'm truly grateful because to the city, to Nicole and Jim and Commissioner Strand as our new liaison officer, and to the mayor's office, because we were able to get this out about 6 weeks ahead of schedule, and that actually opened up for us an opportunity to then refocus back on Elliott Place, as we move towards groundbreaking in November on that 84-unit senior new development. And we'll begin reviewing the proposals once we get them all in on November 16th. And the next step for me is to begin looking at evaluation criteria and again, partnering with the city and community stakeholders to begin looking at what those proposals look like and potentially putting together a team for the evaluation so that we can hopefully get some sort of announcement on a December 4th deadline. Thanks, Nicole.
Any questions or anything for Matthew? Okay.
Maybe a couple things I'd add real quick to his presentation is, there's been discussion about how that property works with the other properties on that block, and the RFP includes some of that analysis. And so there's the diversion-owned property to the east, and there's the Epic owned property where the frying pan is, and they have a master plan development. And so as part of that RFP process, and as they find their co-developer, they'll be continuing to work with the Housing Authority to talk about that as a full concept.
Okay. Anybody have any comments or questions just while we're on this topic? Thomas?
At a real high level, would you, Matthew, just go back timelines or like key dates? You said November, just about getting residents like vouchered, making sure that they're moving
Sure.
out, and just kind of walk through those again for those not quick with a pen.
Sure, Tom, and hi. The timeline's this. So the first relevant date was March 18th, 2020. HUD's Special Applications Center granted to Fargo Housing the permission that we sought to begin moving forward with the future of the high-rise. And from their perspective, that process is done under Section 18 of their Housing Act from 1997, I think, and that allows for them to consider what to do to dispose of or by other disposition method, typically demolition, public housing stock. So for us, and I don't think this is any different from public housing authorities around the country, but for us that meant focusing on the folks first. And through that grant, we then subsequently applied once on March 18th. They said, you're granted permission on a very set schedule and with very fixed conditions, including 110 units of new affordable housing to be included in the future development of that 2 acres of property. We, under subsequent application, then asked for tenant protection vouchers. We have up to 247 tenant protection vouchers available, and under that subsequent application, we were granted the first 95 or so of them. About 150 of them, and with about 90 something left to go. So what's that, 92 or so. So we've got that process up and running, and that's done on a household by household basis, so that we are able to then support those households and those tenants to successfully relocate under tenant protection vouchers, which are effectively, like any other housing choice voucher, where they're able to go into the marketplace and provide the rental assistance by finding a new place to live. We're then providing them additional support through their security deposits and by providing them financial support for the cost of relocating. And Jill Elliott's heading that up with a new staff member who are customizing to meet the needs of those residents. And she's moved, about 24 households successfully out so far. And then we'll, under one more application, ask for the balance of the 92 tenant protection vouchers for 2021. And that sets us on a calendar, Tom, where sometime about a year from now, crossed fingers, we will have successfully rehoused each household that have been in the high-rise since March, but only at the time when they find that it's a good time for them to move and they found a new place to live using that tenant protection voucher. And we're helping them through that application process as well and finding the landlords and matching them up. So then that's sort of the most important thing to Fargo Housing is always the tenants. And then the second thing is on the development side, those dates, the relevant dates, most importantly are, we're taking written questions through September 18th. And Brenda Watersworth is on my staff, and she'll be overseeing those contacts. And she's at brendaw@fargohousing.org for written questions. And then November 16th, 3 o'clock in the afternoon is our deadline for the proposals. And then December 4th is a somewhat expedited review process, but we really want to get the news out before the end of the year about what the future development might look like at the high rise. And Nicole mentioned the adjacent property development that's going on. Whether that property developer is ultimately the successful one or not, I'm pleased to report that they have committed to work with whoever it might be that's going to be developing Lashkowitz and along with Fargo Housing. So we'll keep that moving along. And of course, we're happy to partner with the United Way and anybody else as far as our stakeholders go. I'm keeping the coalition to end homelessness up to date on these things. They're particularly interested, not just because of the pandemic, but just aside from that, how things are going with relocating residents.
Thomas, that does it for you? Okay. Anybody else?
That is sufficient. Yes, thank you.
All right, probably too sufficient, right? But thanks for asking.
Matthew, a question just for the sake of asking it here in this setting. Some folks have wondered if your RFP is just for demolition or if it's potentially for rehab of the Lashkowitz Highways. And what would your answer be to that?
Yeah, and this goes, thank you for that question as well. So mine's been the same, my answer is the same as it has been since I practically started on the job and tried to follow in the very big footsteps of Lynn Fundingslin. I will wait for the experts to tell me what their best recommendations are for the highest and best use in the future of that property. If it happens to include a rehabilitation of the high-rise, that's amazing. There's certainly historic tax credits that might be examined to benefit their financial model. It might be that that's not the answer, but I have no preconception in that regard, any more than I do about who might ultimately have the most successful proposal for our consideration as we look forward to November 16th and December 4th. So the future of the building itself, I'm as excited as anybody to find out what the answer to that question is.
That's really good to clarify that. Thank you for that. Anybody else have any questions on the Lashkowitz High-Rise? Before we continue, we've had Matthew Pike join us in the meeting, and let's add some other folks who've walked in, who joined us since we commenced the meeting. We'll start with Ken.
Just introducing myself?
Absolutely.
Okay, I'm Ken Enixon. I'm a member at large.
Tim Mahoney, Mayor of Fargo.
Linda Clevey, member at large.
Great. It's really terrific to have such a good turnout today, too. Thank you all. Okay, we'll go on to item number 4, the tax incentive finance boundary expansion proposal. This had been presented by Jim Gilmore. Carol Schlossman shared information with us last meeting. Is that you, Nicole? Will that be you updating us?
Yeah, and I think when we did a call out to the committee members, it was a good reminder that this was a topic item from last time. Basically, if you remember, there was a 701 brew, basically a pilot application that was in front of you. I believe is our tax exempt application that was in front of you, and the tax exempt review committee wanted to look at the boundary change as a result of that property. Based on discussion with the Community Development Committee and as well as with neighborhood representatives, there was a decision not to change that boundary at this point in time, and instead looked at modifications to include that 701 brew as a component. So the CD committee did not take action on that other than provide some commentary. And then Jim did, I was just looking at the agenda, 701 brew has been reviewed for that tax exemption, and it went back to the tax exempt review committee and they looked at it per that application. So I believe the tax exempt review committee has approved that individual property for that tax exemption, but there has been no formal boundary change as a result of your input.
Is that still in the works then, do you suspect, for the future? That
Possibly.
formal
I
boundary?
think one of the dialogues that we're having is obviously with the City Commission and the Tax Exempt Review Committee looking at the policies overall. And then that came up just recently at the City Commission meeting, as well as the core neighborhood plan as it looks to land use planning and other policies and goals. So I'll have a little bit more update for you on the core neighborhood plan. But I think from a staff perspective, we'll know more about that topic item once we understand what our goals are. You know, that literally was a situation for that particular property. And since the 701 brew issue was kind of taken up, we've kind of put that topic off to the side.
Okay, anybody have any questions or follow up with that? Thank you, Nicole. We'll go on to number 5, the COVID impact update. Lots to talk about here, but will that be you
Yeah,
primarily?
Tia and I are going to tag team
Great.
that. And so it's just been a whirlwind of a 2020 year so far, and I'm sure everybody here agrees. And we do have Mayor joining us as well. So maybe in response to COVID in late March, the governor appointed a Red River task force to talk to Cass Clay County for COVID response. And in particular, Mayor chairs that along with the Desi Fleming, our Public Health Director. And as part of that work and the work we do with Community Development Committee and Community Development Block Grant, I was appointed to serve on that committee as part of education and awareness, and as we communicate with, I would say, vulnerable populations or populations that might not be in mainstream communication channels or have mainstream needs as a result to COVID impact. So we're talking about people who might need shelter, people who might need assistance. And so, kind of fast and furious between Tia and myself, I know there was a lot of initial calls with working with United Way and trying to get a deep down dive in our social service system and where some of those gaps might be. And then around the same time, the community development, our HUD came out with, as part of their CARES Act funding, the CDBG dollars. I think the cities awarded around $400,000 related to COVID positive or COVID response. And on Monday's City Commission agenda, we've got Red River Task Force funds, CDBG funds, and CDBG 2020 funds as a kind of a proposal as we look at housing, food, and rental assistance. In this situation, we've been primarily focused, I think our primary win so far has been working with United Way and the Ashara partners. They are a network of 5 new American communities, refugee communities, working on specific cultural needs. And through their work they were already doing on workforce development, they were able to ramp up. And so they've been funded about $150,000 to hire public health advocates, communication, translation. And what we're seeing is that first step in getting to the SNAP assistance, housing assistance, and like SENCA. And, if we think about the community groups going there first to the network that they know, and to also disseminate correct and maybe clarity and information related to COVID, especially if you think about the early days in March, like who can get tested, when they can get tested, what does the employer say, what is the employees' results, all of these levels of communication. So I'm currently spending about 50% of my time on COVID type of things. I think Tia's probably spending a good percentage of time on it as well, where it's affecting everything from housing to we're getting ready for looking at homeless shelter needs. Basically what we're finding right now, and I'll maybe pass it to Tia, is what we're finding right now is in the shelters and our providers like the food pantry, things like that. Everybody's reached their threshold. They've gone into reserves of where they normally would be going into winter, and so those are expended. And as they go into winter, they don't have the resources they need to support winter. And so as we specifically think about shelters and flu, winter, and COVID, what does that housing response look like? And so we're working with, we're just very preliminary stages discussions about, possibly conversions of the police department or the former public health over here for some temporary needs, as well as partnering with Clay County on a contract they have with a hotel. We had hotel and state support with this first initial COVID response, but as effective of end of June, that was discontinued, and we're now at a local response level working with the shelter directors. So there's a lot of moving parts, and I think with that I would maybe pass it over to Tia and then open to any questions or discussions.
Yep.
Hello, everybody. You'll see in front of you this COVID-19 summary of community needs. I'm sorry that wasn't in the packet, so you probably haven't had a chance to review that, although I know some of you have as part of my outreach. So what I did was I contacted quite a few different organizations that are serving those special needs populations and low-income populations, and just basically had some pretty raw conversations about what their needs are. And you'll see in the first page and on the back side of it what the biggest needs I did here were. As Nicole mentioned, the homeless quarantine and this triple wave. Included in that is evictions. So there was an eviction moratorium out there for a while that has since been lifted. So what that did was prevent landlords from evicting people during the most unknown times of coronavirus, although, you know, we're not really out of that phase yet either. But now that people can be evicted, a lot of organizations, especially our CAP agency, Community Agency Partnership, is really concerned about how many evictions they might start seeing. A lot of their calls, I don't have the percentage off the top of my head, it might be in this report, I don't recall, but a lot of the calls that they're getting are first-time assistance need calls. So people that have never accessed their services before are now wondering where to go for whether that's rental assistance, mortgage assistance, help with their utility payments, food, childcare, pretty significant needs. So the reason the evictions piece is under the homeless section that you'll see under number 1 is because if people are evicted, obviously they become homeless if they have nowhere else to stay. So that is a pretty significant concern when it comes to somebody who may be homeless and is testing positive for coronavirus because they don't have a safe place to quarantine and they're out in the community and around other folks. So one of the biggest needs is providing homeless prevention, diversion, and housing assistance needs. And you'll see as we get into the HUD program updates later that is some of the major places that our funding is going to. At least we're proposing it. There'll be a public comment period, but I'll give you more information about that.
Tia, if before you go on, and maybe I'm sorry to interrupt here, but help me understand. There's evictions topics, to my knowledge, on at least 2 fronts. One of them was the federal limit on if you had federal funding, you couldn't evict. And the other one was our own local courts had shut down the ability to evict. So they're 2 different beasts, aren't they?
Yeah, there are, and I don't know when the federal one's up. Karin, do you know when that is? It's done. So both of them are done.
Both are done now.
Both are done now. So agencies are expecting these evictions to start rising up. There was kind of a lull in, when everybody else was going through the new cases and whatnot. People aren't seeking that assistance until they're in crisis mode. If they're not worried about being evicted, then they're not seeking that help. But now that they're facing those evictions or they're a couple of months behind rent, now they're in crisis mode. So they're making those phone calls, and that's going to be a pretty significant need coming up that the experts are expecting. And then, that covers number 2 also. And then the homeless healthcare piece was a result from a conversation that I had with Family Health. As some of you may know, they operate the homeless healthcare system too, and they had to close the doors on that to provide for a isolation triage place for anybody that was coming in and presenting COVID symptoms. So they weren't able to do their typical homeless healthcare, and one of their biggest things that they do is chronic disease management. So not being able to see those homeless folks on a regular basis and not knowing where they're at because the libraries are closed and a lot of those public spaces where they typically had gathered, they are no longer gathering. They're uncertain where these folks are. So one of their biggest needs is doing a medical mobile unit that would cover medical care, dental care, COVID testing. So they would go and try to find those folks, and likely they could do that in partnership with the existing mobile outreach crisis unit that the Gladys Ray Shelter has operated for a few years now. They were able to secure some funding for that particular unit, but they do need ongoing supplies for that, which is something you'll see in the City Commission packet for Monday. As that is, I'd have to look. Let me look. Yeah, I'll come up.
So
and
what
look.
we'll do is we'll pull up the packet that we're gonna present to City Commission. It would have been in your packet, but this is how fast-moving this stuff
Yeah.
is we didn't even know what we were gonna present on Monday till like Monday. So just a minute.
It's all good.
I'm gonna have why don't you come up to the mic?
Are
and
you
pull up?
looking for the City Commission packet? Yeah, okay.
By the way, while you're coming up to the microphone, when they say that they're putting 50% of their time into COVID, and they're already putting 40, 50, 60, 70-hour weeks before that, I just don't know how you guys do it. I hope you really acknowledge your staff and your own selves for your extraordinary contribution to this community effort, and everybody who you work with.
Yeah, I think you guys will find it interesting to see what we're coming up with the proposal, and we recognize we don't, this goes back to we don't, as a CD committee, we don't really have bylaws and things like that, so my apologies for not taking this in front of you earlier.
It's not showing up. There's a couple of different documents that aren't showing up from this platform, but
Okay.
we can email that out to you.
We will email it to you, and you'll see it on Monday night. But basically, in summary, it's looking at, I would say, a lot of gratitude to the presentation partners in housing, Thomas Hill, and the work that Cody Schuler is doing with FM Homeless Coalition. And so there's a lot of people doing really great things in our community. And so the COVID response is allowing us to move those timelines faster than we normally would. And so that's what we're really excited about. So most of these are initiatives that are already conducted, and now it's just a matter of implementation. And so we're looking at approximately $200,000 of funding for our presentation partners, looking at about $400,000 of funding for food assistance with the food pantry and the Great Plains Food Bank. And I don't think the recipients even know about this yet, so this is all just that current. And
They don't.
so they might be hearing that fresh. And so in response to some of that, it's pretty fast moving. And so we're trying to follow up quickly with getting the subrecipient agreements and the agreements through the task force. And the Ashara program, again, is another great work that Thomas and United Way and Ahmed Shield has been conducting. And so again, if these partnerships hadn't already been there, I think our response to COVID would have been, I can't even imagine what that would have been. And I would say hats off to the mobile outreach unit for Gladys Ray. So the story as part of that is really fascinating, because what you're seeing on the streets today in downtown and some of maybe the instances that are more visible than maybe were pre-COVID is all a result of the network between early release from Cass County Jail, the mobile outreach unit being directly responsible for assisting when a lot of our other partners couldn't be assisting people that were in crisis or needing medical outreach. As Tia was saying, because family or homeless health was closed, Gladys Ray had to pick up some of that. So at one point, Gladys Ray, I know, was working out of at least 4 different satellite locations, and along with their mobile outreach during the spring. And so I don't even want to. So as part of this work, since we were able to get a little pause, Tia was able to interview all of our partners. So what did you learn? What do we need for fall? And so that's what the spending plan is in response to. And so that's what you'll see going to City Commission on Monday. And I think technically we have a quorum right now. And so anyway, just as
We do have a quorum, yes.
What?
I'm sorry, did you ask about quorum?
1, 2, 3.
We have a quorum, yeah.
Yeah. And so anyway, just as a response to that, you'll see that on Monday night.
Okay. Tia, you'll continue here?
Yeah, and I think we pretty much covered everything. The food insecurity uncertainties, like the food banks haven't been able to have their typical food drives. Their volunteers have been scared to work, so they've had to hire extra staff. They have had problems with their supply chain, so they've had to actually order semi-loads of food. So a lot of expenses that, of course, they weren't budgeting, like many organizations are facing. And New American Refugee needs, and then there are some, not everybody, just a couple of places that need some PPE yet. They're not really sure where they're gonna get that next, but a majority of them are doing pretty good in that area. And then I think another need that I would that I've heard since I wrote this is now with schools going back to school, there's some concern about the equipment that might be needed for some of that remote learning. So whether that's laptops or hotspots or internet access. Robin, I don't know if you're able to speak to that in terms of what the school is currently able to provide, because I haven't been able to have a conversation with anybody from the school yet about what you guys will be doing versus maybe some of those gaps that you're going to be seeing.
Sure. All middle and high school students already have personal learning devices, and then we used ESSER funds, federal funds, to bring the digital learning down to the elementary. So K through 2 have Chromebooks, 4 through 5 have iPads. Literally every family in the city of Fargo has been called and contacted about their internet access. That happened last spring. I believe there is a provider in town that is providing, I know there's a provider in town that's providing free internet access. Some of the problems that we're having, however, is those are with weak signals. Some of the families that I serve at the Boys and Girls Clubs with 4 or 5 kids, their internet access is too bogged down, and a lot more of that synchronous distance learning will be taking place this year. So I think there will be more needs during the day for that stronger internet signal. Is that what you were seeking?
Yeah, that is. And I know that there are some eligible expenses with our community development block grant fund to do some of that stuff. And we do have a little bit of a cushion with the Red River Task Force Fund. So if somebody from the school, whether it's you or somebody else, just keep us in the loop on where you're seeing those gaps, I think that would be really helpful.
So CDBG dollars?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Thomas.
If I could just maybe ask a question, part in Robin, part to Tia, but if there's been any consideration given now that school is basically upon us, especially for out of school time needs where kids would most likely be in supported programs, whether it be like Boys and Girls Club or a Y program. But are there any sort of learning communities or any sort of like projects, ideas, thoughts given to how kids are supported when they're not in school, given that many of them were in after school activities and now might not be, and obviously parents still have to go back to work? Again, I know it's a whole different, and that's gonna, I'm not asking for an answer, but at least maybe to give some considerations for how neighborhoods or community schools are supported during this time, because I think it's gonna just be a whole new ballgame for a lot of people, especially as you think about trying to navigate this for a semester or an entire year or longer.
So, I can make a couple comments. There is, for our elementary, which are primarily the age in Fargo Public Schools that would need custodial care, because that's part of what you're talking about, but quality custodial care. Guided practice centers are being offered during certain blocks throughout the school year within the middle and high schools. And that is going to be prioritized on a needs basis. So some of those higher need, lower socioeconomical and economic, and then some extreme hardships will be accepted into those. But there is a tremendous gap in childcare, and I run the Boys and Girls Clubs. In fact, we're in McCormick Park now too with Charism. We serve about 800 families a year, before and after school. Our staff and the Ys are primarily college students that are not available during the day. So what we are experiencing more than anything is staff shortages and that quality and safe space. We have the spaces. We are also childcare licensed that typically take about 60 to 90 days to complete the initial licensing process. We've asked for a fast track from Chris Jones from the Department of Human Services to help us get those pushed through. But it's gonna be crunch time, and we're gonna be turning away families. And I was just on a phone call yesterday with Fargo Public Schools and the Y, and it all comes down to staffing availability. Not as much as space, but most of us have applied for the PPE and through the new ERG grant that was just, well, went up and down a couple times the first day, but the dollars are there. They're keeping us afloat, but I'm concerned about lack of care.
Anybody else? Okay, Tia, continue.
Hey, John,
Oh,
just one
John,
quick
certainly.
question. At least I haven't seen it in the news or anything. To date, yeah, there hasn't been any, like, I'd say group positive testing in any of the facilities from what you've heard, right, or what we've seen?
Group positive testing,
Well,
what
I
do you
mean, through the different places that care for this population that we're talking about.
Like positive cases in homeless shelters? and-
Right.
Yeah, there have been pretty regularly.
There have been.
I don't know if you have any more information on those numbers, Nicole?
When we do contact testing, we contact test any area that has positivity.
Yep.
So early on, the task force went into all the group homes and everybody tested them. And you basically test them down until they're negative. You continue to follow that group until they're negative. Same as in nursing homes, same as in group homes. So that's why City of Fargo, West Fargo, Moorhead, we run a positivity rate less than 2%, and we continue to drive those numbers down. It's just that whenever you find it, you immediately do that. We still have a Family Health Care Center as a testing site that'll run to December, so anybody can be tested. So we've done much better, and the homeless shelters have done really good for us, helping isolate people that need to be isolated.
Good job.
Anybody else?
I think my main comment and lesson learned so far is good communication, and so one, sometimes we assume someone else is taking care of it and nobody is. And then sometimes we hear of a need and it's just a matter of a quick phone call and that connection to those resources. And so just, keeping your ears open, and you all provide a network of influence and community members. And so if you're hearing of gaps, please bring those up.
Nicole, if I recall, and Tia, when the discussion started with the New American community, I want to say you were interacting with 24 or so different people and groups. And what are there, 60-some languages in town? That's just an amazing stretch. And you all really just rallied to folks reached out and needed help, and the baton got passed and handled relatively well, really well. But, okay, we'll continue. Tia, anything else?
Nope.
Any other questions, comments on this whole? Ken?
So reading through the information in this COVID packet, the possible solutions heard pretty much to every one of them is additional funding, and I'm just curious, where is that going? Have we identified sources of additional funding, or what's the status on that? Because clearly that's where the biggest need is.
Yeah, so I think we have three. That's the email that we'll follow up with. There's basically 3 to 4 sources of funds right now, and to echo Commissioner Nelson's point, we're hearing that a lot from everything from the shelter providers to our other social service partners. It's not a money thing right now, it's a staffing capacity thing right now for the first time ever. But between the Red River Task Force dollars that are coming from the state, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Mayor, there is around $6 million in there, and then between the CDBG 2020 funds that we're allocating to that, there's close to $700,000 there, and then the COVID CDBG dollars is close to $450,000 there. So those are just kind of 3 buckets of funds that we honestly are probably stretched a little thin in trying to administer, but we think there's more possibilities of funding out there with relationships with the state, relationships with the emergency services grant dollars, FEMA dollars. I know our finance department is working hard to acquire more funding. And so I think we could always use more funding, but at the same time, we do have funds that we're trying to throw to align to these needs.
Thomas?
I would, just to add to that for clarification, so there's a group of local, statewide, and regional funders that are meeting every other week. So that includes Dakota Medical Foundation, that is really focused on personal protective equipment. United Way, we're focused on homeless prevention. FMary Foundation is community needs, as well as the Otto Bremer Trust, Bush Foundation, North Dakota Community Foundation. So I think what foundations at least have done pretty darn well of late is to really talk to one another to ensure that we're meeting the collective needs to the best of our abilities, and not all just funding PPE, or not just all funding childcare. And really finding what our niche is and how can we leverage our collective funding either together or with local, state, and federal resources as well.
Robin?
I would add another dimension to that. Not only are we working, because we're operating at a deficit right now, but we are keeping our balance sheet whole due to a lot of these federal funds. But there are two dimensions here: immediate needs and sustainability.
Yep.
And so that's where we need a lot of these community-based organizations to be sustainable in the future. And that's why some community child care emergency operating grants are coming down from the state to keep us whole and to keep us there, because we realize how important that is to the economy statewide.
Yeah, and I think even further on that, there have been discussions about future funding coming through. There might be more appropriations with the Community Development Block Grant. It's hard to know what the future of that's going to look like in the middle of, an election this November. So we really aren't sure where that's going to go, and I'm not sure that the leaders do at this time either. But after this funding is expended and out of our purview, there might be more coming down the pipeline.
Anybody else? I have a question for the sake of asking. Is there anything keeping you up at night that you're worrying about that we need to know, that we need to just kind of, something that you're fretting about, that how are we going to handle this if this happens? Or
For us, I'm pretty certain it's the homeless situation with that triple wave coming, and where are these folks going to stay when it's cold out? If they've been evicted, if they have coronavirus, where are we going to have them be safely isolated for 2 weeks until they test positive? I think, I'm echoing what we're hearing in the community, and that personally keeps me awake at night.
Actually, I'm sleeping okay, but thanks for asking. No, I think the uncertainty is what's causing because we don't know, like when we communicate with the shelter leaders, they seem okay, but then when we start talking about the increase of eviction and other things, then, so the system is just like kind of stressed, and is what's going to be the piece that throws the stress over the cliff, and how do we respond in an emergency situation? And so what's really hard when we're talking strategically with our partners is understanding how to, just exactly what Robin said, is how to respond to the crisis component, and then what's the long-term solution, and everywhere in between, because most of these partners we've been having multi-year conversations about, like, I'll just say the Partners in Housing program, that's been a long conversation of planning and leadership by our partners in our community. And so we're really lucky that are building the infrastructure, but knowing that there's more. So I don't think there's a whole lot that's stressing me out, other than it's constant, and it's a constant pace. And of course, I'm not the mayor, I don't know how the public health is doing this right now, because that's...
A question I have that I don't know the answer to is there a community hotline or a navigator line? Because so many times people don't know where to even begin turning to for COVID. Is
First
there one?
Link's 211.
We should have a community COVID hotline at some point, where we really create a clearinghouse for somebody to manage and coordinate and communicate and relegate questions.
211 is really what we're trying to...
211?
Yeah,
First Link.
First Link 211, answered locally by First Link and United Way, is really what we're trying to push all of those to, because that's what we're finding is a lot of people don't even know where to go. And so to start with 211, that's not going to get everybody, but it's at least going to understand where those needs and gaps are. And we're pulling data from that. So we need that data that 211 leads as well.
Great.
And that's
Anybody
actually-
else?
Oh, it's just
Thomas.
with the 211 line, 211 is they're doing the triage services for North Dakota's Rent Bridge program. So if you're a public service announcement, I guess, too, if you are in need of paying rent and cannot pay it, North Dakota actually does, through the state, have a program available, and you start by calling 211. And so that's anywhere in North Dakota, but if it's here in Fargo, West Fargo, even Moorhead, it's answered locally by First Link. So yeah, 3 simple numbers.
I'm just, while I'm asking too, is there anybody who's getting any sense, there's a lot of folks unemployed, and there's a lot of folks who are losing the extra bump they had in their unemployment assistance. What are y'all hearing about that? Are people starting to fall through the cracks? a lot of businesses aren't able to open or aren't able to pay similar wages that they had or aren't able to survive maybe. Hopefully they will, but going forward. But I'm worried about that crowd of people who are employment insecure and where we're at with that. Anybody have any sense of that? I have a feeling we should keep our eyes on that. It's now going to start unfolding, the challenges people are having financially. And then they're also having challenges with home care and child care. And it's just so. One last comment to our staff and to the team here is now that we're coming back into business with this committee, if you have emergency needs, we'll convene this committee as you need it, if it's necessary. Okay, anything else? All right, we'll go on. Thank you. Great work, again, an amazing amount of support from our departments and our city and our staff and our people and our community partners. Who'd ever thought we'd be talking about a pandemic in community development, but we are. All right, we'll go on to the next item, number 6, community development updates.
Okay, so that's my next item also, and to be respectful of everybody's time, I will do this pretty quickly, and I will make sure to email this PowerPoint presentation to you just so you have it, but oftentimes we come to you guys talking about approve this money, let's do this, let's do that, but we never really have like a show and tell session, so I just wanted to show you what we've been working on in the last, I'd say 12 months or so, and where we're going in the future. So first we'll quickly cover affordable housing, multifamily rental. This is Homefield 3. I'm very certain you've heard of Homefield 1 and 2. This is a Beyond Shelter Inc. project. It's currently going, well, it's not currently under development. It will be starting soon. This is an actual photo of Homefield 1 and 2, and the Homefield 3 will just be on the right-hand side of that picture there going up. And that is located kind of by the zoo, just south of the zoo. You'll see Homefield 2 and 3 pegged out there, and 1. So we have home funding involved in this project, construction funding for $548,000. We also use CDBG money to help them with the acquisition of that lot, and that was about $526,000. And if you ever have any questions about Homefield 3, Ms. Flom back here is our expert project manager on this. She's been working pretty diligently on Homefield 3 since she started about a year ago. This is also a Beyond Shelter project. So this is the Milton Earl. This is going to be started, I believe, in the not in the next 12 months, but it's about a year out. They currently have site control. This is property that we owned, that we demolished blighted properties on. It's next to the sanctuary, so in that photo you can see that steeple in the background. That's the Sanctuary Event Center downtown. So this will be a senior rental housing unit, just like the Homefield ones are, but located downtown. And it's named after the Milton Earl district, which is in that area, a famous architect. So these are some of the renderings. They're working with Foss Architecture and Interiors. Elliott Place. So this is Fargo Housing and Redevelopment Authority project. Very excited to see this going up. We used community development funds to assist in the acquisition of this lot several years ago, and now it is going to be a combination of 2 projects that form an 84-unit senior rental housing project. Mr. Pike, I don't know if you want to add anything else to it. It's named after Jill Elliott, which is pretty exciting.
Thanks. Well, I'm so impressed, of course, by seeing the important work that Beyond Shelter Inc. is doing as well. Of course, that Beyond Shelter Inc. will always be near and dear to Fargo Housing's heart, as it started there and under Dan Madler's leadership forward. Yeah, Elliott Place. So Jill Elliott is the longtime employee of Fargo Housing. She's going on 42 years of committed service to Fargo Housing. And when we had this opportunity, I'll tell you, it's the easiest decision I had to make on this entire project was what to name it. Although it took a little while to come up with place. We went with gardens and other alternatives. Elliott Apartments just seemed too simple, but when we came up with Elliott Place, that was the magic. I'm glad you've got the picture. That's a relatively recent rendering, and we're looking at a groundbreaking anticipated before the end of the year. It will involve underground parking, so there's a little bit of a challenge there to get in there before winter starts. And we got over a hurdle this summer on the financing side, but it's moving forward. The design phase is moving forward at quite a clip. And an anticipated, I'd sort of invite everybody now, an anticipated ribbon cutting in November of 2021.
Thank you. And this is another project that will be managed by Ms. Flum back here. So if you have any questions, she'll be able to answer them. Yeah, I was going to say something else about that, but I cannot remember. Oh, they're working with YH Partners, so a local architect in town, on that project. So some of our single-family homeowner infill affordable housing related projects. So these are examples of infill, and all of these projects are specifically Habitat for Humanity projects. That's not necessarily saying that all the infill projects that we do are going to be with Habitat for Humanity, but these are some examples of the types of homes you could see in some of the infill lots. One of the lots that we acquired was 1410 First Avenue South, and this will be donated to the Clay County Community, or Cass Clay Community Land Trust. That's a mouthful. But you could see the home that was there before it was demolished. So this was through our inspections department. Demolished, came back to the city through foreclosure, tax forfeiture, sorry, not foreclosure. And eventually there'll be affordable housing on that lot. And that's where that's located. It's actually not far from the shelter, Gladys Ray Shelter. Similar story, 916 Fifth Avenue South. This property still stands. We are in the process of demolishing this property. Another Karen Flom project. So any questions on these two CLT projects she's going to be working? It sounds like she's doing all of our work. She's amazing. So yeah, we will be demolishing this. It's blighted on the inside. Here's some images to prove that it's blighted before we tear it down. These will be this property will be torn down with community development block grant, slum and blight removal dollars. And that was also through a tax forfeiture through the county, so that will be donated to, once we get the site ready, it'll be donated to the CCCLT.
Thomas?
Sorry, well, that's really cool to see both those properties because I used to live in that neighborhood. And so to see that those homes are getting new life and get new homes there. I guess my question would be is, with the land trust, is there conversations with the Jefferson Neighborhood Association and maybe some of the aesthetic important pieces that those homes should try and maintain, just knowing that there's part of, and maybe not in those specific areas, but they're trying to do a historic overlay. I think we've actually talked about that at this community or at this committee, but I'm just curious the design elements that they're thinking about for these houses to ensure that they try and keep some of that historic nature of the neighborhood.
Sure, yeah, no, I think those are important conversations to happen. They're not that far into the conversations yet. These properties are still within the city of Fargo's name, and we're just now finding the time to do something with them, and we've just had initial conversations, but I think as we get closer to something like that, it'll probably come to this committee, and we will invite them to discuss it. They recently got hired a permanent executive director now. Oh gosh, I forget his name. Trenton. I don't remember his last name, but those conversations will definitely happen, and we are thinking about doing some agreements that would incorporate such conversations and
Thomas, that historic overlay is in place now.
Yeah. Oh. So this was another property. This is 702 2nd Street North. This one will be donated to Lake Agassiz Habitat for Humanity. You can see on the left side the blighted property there. So that was also a community development block grant funding. There was a fire in this home. The people left. Nobody was hurt in this fire, but it was left blighted. No possibility of remodeling this at all. And we tore that down last year. Exactly 1 year after the fire was the demolition day. So it was kind of unique how that happened. So they'll be developing this site. This is where it's located. It's not far from Sanford downtown. This is what the interior looked like. So pretty significant smoke damage, but I mean, you could see how it looked before there was smoke damage. It was unsightly property on the interior. Another lot, 1529 10th Avenue South. This is also the same situation, but this is a vacant lot. So sometimes in community development, what we do is we work with partners like Habitat for Humanity because we have to keep our money moving. And if we find ourselves kind of stuck with money, this is one way we can spend it on affordable housing, is to work with them, ask them if they're interested in any particular vacant lots. And we were up against the clock with this one. So we have a vacant lot here, and they will be developing this one in the next year or two. And that's where that's located. It's a perfect location if they have a young family, with Carl Bend being right there, because the kids could just walk to school. So that's in our Jefferson neighborhood. And then the infamous 13th Avenue properties and 7th Street. So I think the last time we met, we had just talked about how planning had issued an RFP for these particular sites. Many years ago on these lots, there were blighted homes, which we tore down with neighborhood stabilization program funding. And now we need to do something with it. So as part of that RFP, we were seeking an affordable housing developer, and we only received one proposal by Rebuilding Together. And this is their most current perspective drawing of what they plan to do there. So it'll be owner-occupied twin home, relatively small, but it's going to be a really good starter home because of the size. It's going to be probably a little bit more affordable than other properties like that. And also, they're in the initial stages of discussing possibly partnering with the land trust on this too, which would make it even a more affordable option for home ownership.
They already have.
They have?
Yep.
Yep, okay. So that's located on 13th Avenue, just past University Drive, so Art and Learn and Olivet Church. Seeing that we have 3 minutes left, I'm just really gonna breeze through the rest of this. So another thing we use community development block grant funds for are public facility improvements. This was Washington Elementary. They had a very old playground there. I didn't even share the picture because I thought the new one was very exciting. So there's accessible equipment here now where there wasn't before. And the problem with the old playground that they had was, one, it wasn't accessible for children who may be in a wheelchair or have some mobility impairments. And also it was so old that they weren't able to find new replacement parts when needed. So this is a really colorful and exciting project to see happen. Gladys Ray Shelter, we're in the process, just started the process 2 weeks ago to do some public improvements here. Basically a facelift of the entire place. We've also operated or gave funds for the laundry and dryer and a dishwasher, and they're so happy, and I can't believe they went as long as they did with some of the equipment that they've had there. It gets used and abused, so we are excited about that. So a long time ago, we talked about doing acquisition here. So Youthworks got into this place. I think we spent a little over $500,000 to help them, or $300,000 to help them acquire this property to have for their homeless youth shelter. And they are very much in love with this property, and I'm so glad they got in it. I think that's pretty much all we have time for. I'll just breeze through some of our rehab projects, re-roofing, siding, future, our public service projects, so the things that you can't really show pictures for. These are the list of things that we do with funding other than the pretty stuff, the tangible stuff. And these are like the important services that we gotta keep going with. And here are some potential new future projects. And we actually talked about all of these already, so. Look at that, I did it, 3:29. Are there any questions about any of that?
All I can say is amazing work. It's nice to have a show and tell, to have us see the physical, tangible results of the community actions that you embark upon and undertake. Just really good work, thank you.
Thank you.
And that doesn't include the storefronts.
No.
There's a whole
But that program it's been, it's done.
Is it? Okay.
It's done. It's lived its useful life. We remodeled pretty much all we could in that Slum and Blight area, and
Any questions on that? Thank you, Tia. We'll continue HUD updates.
I think I'm just gonna, if, just because we're already at 3:30, all of those program updates that I was gonna verbally explain to you are in the staff report, so you can take a look at those. And if you have any questions, you can certainly give me a call, email me, stop by, whatever you would like to do, if that's okay with everybody today.
Okay. All right, we'll continue to any announcements. Staff reports, anything else other than what we've just touched upon?
I would just call attention to both the community development, the core neighborhood plan and the land development code plan. They're both at pivotal points right now, and you can find a lot of information online. I know we have some of our steering committee members that are sitting on CD committee representing that work with the core neighborhood plan. The core neighborhood plan is scheduled for completion at the end of December, and the land development code diagnostic. So the stage we're at there is recommendations on ways to improve the land development code. That should be coming out in around October or so. But they're both at pivotal points where we're starting to get that information and do that analysis, put it back out into the community to see if the analysis was and suggestions were captured correctly. And so I just call your attention to that and be glad to answer any questions on that. And then things to look forward to. I'll just take Tia's time here. The 5-year plan update will be coming to you here shortly. With the COVID, one of the benefits that we got from the community, from HUD, is they were able to push a lot of our timelines down the road. And so our 5-year plan update got moved to 2021. And some other relief valves were put in place with the current HUD schedule. And so that's nationwide, and so we're right in keeping with our peers in how to accommodate these extra funds that are coming in.
It would have otherwise been due this week.
Okay, anybody else? I believe our next meeting is Tuesday, September 22nd. 2:30, and it's been a lot of catching up. I think every chance you can acknowledge our staff and our people and our community partners that are really doing so much these days. That's a lot of it unseen, and it's just terrific to have us moving forward. You know, it's also nice to not have some of the challenges. There's a lot of towns and cities with amazing financial challenges and staff layoffs and curtailing programs and services. And for the moment here, we can knock on wood for the moment, we're still moving forward. Let's just hope that continues. And a good chunk of that is because of the work of the people on our behalf. So, and all of you, thanks for being on this committee. Thanks for being back with us again. Don't hesitate reaching out to our staff folks if you have questions, and we'll see you in September. Okay, we stand adjourned.